Welcome to our new episode of Digital Health Inside Out show. And today we have an amazing episode. But before that, an important announcement. We are just officially 99,981 subscribers short of our first 100,000 subscribers. So please help us make this little push. Hit the bell button, subscribe, like, share this episode with everyone you know, and then ask everyone you know to share with everyone else. So help us get to this first milestone, hopefully by the end of the show, and you watch this episode. And now let's get to the episode itself. Today we're going to talk about AI in healthcare, particularly AI Scribe tools. And we want to answer a very simple question. Why the hell do we need 126 medical AI scribes? And we have an amazing lineup today that's going to help us answer that question. Traditionally, my co-host, Sergei Polevikov. Also, we have Brendan Keeler, Bobby Gulick, and Alex LeBron. Hi, Alex.
You don't have a system that's set up for these companies to succeed.
Did VC bros destroy digital health?
Healthcare is like 20 years behind.
That's so disrespectful.
Any little error could be catastrophic in medicine. Agents is like the story of 2025.
Digital.
So let's do a really fast, flash round of 15 seconds intros because we have lots of things to discuss. We cannot just do intros for another 5 minutes. So I'll go first. I'm Alex. I'm your today's moderator. I'm also in health tech. I've been building all kind of products in healthcare industry and for healthcare industry for many years, and lately, obviously, AI solutions as well. And I also have a medical device startup called Yod. Sergey, please introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Sergei. I have a background in machine learning and applied mathematics. I ventured into healthcare about 5 years ago. I'm running a startup in digital health, and I also have AI health consultancy. I just want to emphasize that today is a special episode. Just on a personal note, I think on this particular topic, which I think is a very important topic, if I have to choose like a group of people who would represent this particular area the best, I probably wouldn't choose the better group of, I guess, 4 experts, 3 experts plus me. So I appreciate you being here and look forward to the discussion.
Thanks for being precise and staying out of 15 seconds. Brendan, please introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, Brendan Keeler, interoperability practice lead at HTD Health, a consultancy and development agency focused explicitly on healthcare. I've done integration and interop things my whole career, Epic, Redux, Zeus Health, and Flexpa, and I write a blog about it, Health API Guy. Thanks.
Please subscribe, everyone, to Brendan's blog. Bobby.
Everyone, Bobby Gulick. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Elion. We are a healthcare technology research and intelligence platform. Try and make it easier for healthcare organizations to discover, evaluate, and select the right technology for their organizations, mostly focused on the provider side of things, hospitals, health systems, other large enterprise provider orgs. Background, last 12 or so years in a couple of healthcare startups was at Oscar Health, and then one called Formation Bio before starting Elion a few years ago. Great to be here.
Very cool. And last but not least, Alex.
Hey, my name is Alex Lebrun, the co-founder and the CEO of Nabla. So Nabla is an ambient AI company. We don't like to say AI Scribe, Alex. So I say ambient AI. I started Nabla 6 years ago. Maybe there are 126 tools on the market today, but I think we were the first available on the market 3 years ago in the US. And before Nabla, I founded several AI startups. The last was acquired by Meta, so I spent 4 years with Meta AI research before leaving to start Nabla.
Thank you. And sorry I could not pronounce your last name with that French amazing accent. I need to work on my French. Alex, let's actually start with you. And my first question is, AI Scribe is just a more sophisticated dictaphone with the ability to summarize it, or that's something else?
I think if you want that, you may use ChatGPT and you'll be probably happy. So I think it's much more than that. So first thing, maybe most important is the integration with EHR. I think we'll speak a lot about that today, but an AI scribe that is not well integrated and cannot feed or read data from the tool that clinicians are using is not very efficient. Also, a scribe has to produce structured data that has to map exactly into the data schema used by the EHR. So it's not like text output as you may think when you look at it. It's actually very structured using different ontologies like ICD-10 and others. And finally, I think it produces much more than a summarization, but also coding, for revenue cycle management, instructions for patients. It may be proactively guiding the clinician for clinical documentation integrity, for clinical decision support. So I think there are all these other workflows that ambient AI is doing more and more. And so for that reason, I really think it's not just a dictaphone, but much more.
Well, I think you're talking a lot about what you have accomplished at Nabla, but does that mean all 126 tools available out there have similar functionality?
No, of course. I think it's easy as you point out, somewhere else. It's easy to do like a dictaphone, dictaphone and just a text summarization. And so in the 126, so maybe a long tail of small tools would just do that with a very thin wrapper over LLMs that everybody has access to. And I think these tools, if they don't evolve, I don't see the how they would survive. So yeah, for sure, there are very different actually projects across these 126 tools.
I have counterpoint.
Please go ahead.
If I could jump in.
Sure.
It's just that every B2B software market has a like capability set spread. And like there's bougie, nice, upscale, like picture perfect execution at like a Nabla or a Bridge or something that's doing the deep integration and all the fun things. And then there's the free dictaphone version or whatever that's just doing like a simple note or whatever that you're copy pasting. And so like it is not to say like, oh, like everything has to be the deeply integrated thing, ignores the realities of like that is not how B2B markets shape up. Like look at EHRs. There's really advanced, like all the bells and whistles, all the Rube Goldberg machine of like logic to down to each specialty of the Epics and Athenas and all that versus like there's a long tail of 300 EHRs that somehow still exist. That's like out of Des Moines that's serving like 3 customers. And so like the reality is I think the shape of the market probably looks little bit like that, just because B2B markets are fragmented inherently.
I'm gonna maybe disagree with Brent and agree with Alex a little bit. I think the reason that the mere fact that so many solutions exist is actually a testament that the healthcare system is fucked up and so fragmented. Because I think in a maybe more I guess free market or whatever you want to call it, and I looked at a number of these solutions, and I think Nabla is actually on the good side of things, but most of them are, to be honest, like wrappers and kind of knockoffs from foundational LLMs, which is fine because they're paying for those foundational models. But I'm just saying, under normal circumstances, that would not be sustainable. And the only reason they are sustainable is because the system is so fucked up and so fragmented. So I don't know if that makes sense.
To me a little bit, but I disagree because there's no B2B market in any industry that's shaped like that, where they're like B2B vertical markets are fragmented almost all the time. Not everyone needs a Ferrari, and some people need a Prius, and some people get diluted into buying the lemon. And so kind of every B2B software market is pretty fragmented with different capability sets. And so like, will there be some culling? I think yes, but to imagine that everyone has the capital that has the like free time to research the market, to choose something, doesn't seem right to me. And the second is that the EHR market upon which scribes are dependent is fragmented. And so those lines, those boundaries are real, that Nabla needs to make a conscious decision to invest into some Des Moines EHR to do the EHR integration to be competitive in a market that's only 10 or 15 providers. And so it's like the EHR market reflects onto the scribe market in some ways.
I agree that that's the reason that we have so many solutions, is because it's fragmented and every EHR is special. And so every solution has its place. I'm just saying, in my opinion, it's just not sustainable when 90% of solutions basically use Google Voice under the hood and whatever OpenAI. There are only few, and Nabla is one of them that I've seen that actually do some original research. And again, it's okay, people make money, companies make money any way they want. My opinion is just not sustainable long term.
I wanted to talk about tech side a little bit. And actually, as the recent Elion report, which you, Bobby, played an instrumental role in, states that ambient scribing vendors rely on existing frontier models as a starting point, and the boundaries between categories will likely continue to blur. So is there still innovation in it? And you added some important pieces, obviously integration with HR, which also, from the technical perspective, probably not the most complex problem. So is there still any innovation behind AI Scribe tools? Bobby, what do you think?
I feel less equipped to answer this than the person sitting in this call who actually develops these solutions. But our sense is, yes, there is still some degree of differentiation, even if they are starting with, foundation models in certain circumstances. But I do think over time, there's still, like any B2B SaaS market, there's such differentiation in the ultimate end user experience and how they're actually built and ingested, right? So even if some of the technology differences, I'll say, flatten over time, I still think you're left with a landscape where just some give a much better experience, ultimately result in better quality, fit into the workflows better. That does become durable. So yes is the short answer. I do think there's still some differentiation on the technology side. Whether that remains specifically on the scribing side over time, I'd defer to Alex a little bit more. But I think the other thread is how do, for most of these solutions, how do they start to move into adjacent kind of workflows and use cases and start to become true co-pilots, which is, you referenced the article we wrote a couple months ago. I think that's the direction that we and many others see, that there's, a lot of I'll say coming together across these different categories as everybody's kind of finding their foothold and then branching off into the adjacent use cases that in some cases I think do require more technical capabilities as well, if you look at things like summarization, for example. So a couple quick thoughts.
Yeah,
cool, thanks. Yeah, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, if you are talking about like vague text summarization, yes, you probably can use off-the-shelf LLMs to do that today. But if you are, talking about the workflows I was mentioning before, like for instance, coding, coding is very difficult even for humans. If you try to use like GPT-4 or Gemini for that today, you will get very bad accuracy. It will be very slow and it will be very expensive compared to using like more distilled and fine-tuned models. And so I think, but maybe in 2 years or 1 year, it will be easy to do that with the last OpenAI model, and then there will be something else that we are doing with more customized models. So I think it's not a static game. I think having more technology than just what's on the shelf gives you an edge, and there are the new workflows you can address with these. And then you get caught up by the LLM 1 year later, and I think this is true across many industries, and it's true in healthcare as well. But today there are many things where we use a combination of off-the-shelf models and our own models, and we couldn't get to the accuracy or speed and price level, cost level as well, that we are at today without if we were just using off-the-shelf LLMs. And finally, I'd say, 10 years from now, everything may be LLM wrapper. And you could say that today, every SaaS product is a wrapper around a database. And maybe in the 70s, people said, yeah, every software is a wrapper over C, the language C. So I think it's a bit naive as well, because there is much more than just the core machine learning technology. We are talking about products, user adoption, ease of use, UX, and what EHR integrations, and what works is a combination of that with a good product execution. So I think sometimes we are maybe too much focused on the LLM aspect of the product, but there are so many other things that needs to be right for the product to be adopted.
I mean, that's 100% right. Like like imagining that you just described all of SaaS. All of SaaS is some database with some UI that has some marketing that appeals to somebody, and not all of it has to be venture backable, and some might be bootstrapped, and that the 10 doctors that a person has in rural Idaho is enough to sustain that business, and the doctors are happy with their very simplistic piece of software. And so I struggle to see, everyone thinks that these markets, B2B markets, are winner take all, and I don't know of any that are winner take all. B2B vertical software is inherently fragmented by some horizontal winner, and then you go a layer down, and then there's another horizontal winner, and another, fractally, infinitely. And so there's a lot of space for different players to hyper focus on, I'm going to be the scribe for home health agencies. I know Nabla is doing a lot, but like, I don't know that you've tackled home health or dental or like these random specialties that somebody's going to go do and win that category and be like the scribe for dental. You see this with like Deep Scribe and oncology. They're like hyper focused on Flatiron and oncology. You see this with I forget the ones doing behavioral health, but you see these specializations that allow people to gain this submarket where they're dominant, but they're still not universal. And some might choose Nabla as a more horizontal general purpose option. And so I see this like, over and over again. We see this across all software, that B2B software is very, very, very rarely winner take all.
I don't know if any of the startups who are actually making a profit. And so, again, to me, I believe that just playing devil's advocate, none of these big companies like Amazon or Google are perhaps heavily in this space because margins are not there for them. They're investing like here and there. Obviously, Google has its ventures firm that's throwing money, but in general, it's like they're looking at the margins. They have their cloud business that they're making all the money. And so again, to me, financially, I don't know. I mean, maybe Alex has a different opinion, but it's at this point kind of hard to see how they're going to survive, all of them.
I mean, several. In our case, we are not that far from being profitable. I think there is a very good path to profitability as we expand more and more workflows. I also think that the reason why Google, for instance, is not in healthcare is not because there is no profit, but it's more maybe related to risk or complexity of go-to-market, where you can have a massive go-to-market, one size fits all approach how they like. But yeah, I actually agree a lot with Brandon that there may be for some specialties at least like niche areas where a very specific product, even at small scale, with low investment, may make sense and become profitable on even if it doesn't become a Salesforce or very big. And then you'll have more horizontal players. And I think at Nabla, we invested a lot on supporting 50 specialties and giving also a lot of personalization option to clinicians at the user level. We never met two physicians who agree on what is the best way to document something or to do this workflow. So we had to give them a lot of freedom. And it's very important for health systems or clinics where multi-specialty, where they cannot select one scribe per vertical, per specialty. But I also recognize that in some situations, specialty specific scribe may work actually.
If we start talking about money and considering the number of available tools out there, and probably the number is going to grow, does that mean that the cost for services of Nabla and other companies is going to go down, and healthcare providers are going to start more aggressively negotiate those prices?
Well, actually, our revenues per clinician go up because we are doing much more now than just documentation. But yeah, if you say it's a fixed perimeter and it's only documentation and nothing else, probably as everything AI powered, the price of that alone will go down. We added very recently like dictation, the old style raw dictation that is very different from ambient listening because it has to run on the operating system level, very, very fast, very technical speech with very close low-level operating system integration. We are adding a lot of features on review cycle management, coding. So all that is in addition to the initial value of documentation. So I think looking at the footprint of AI assistance for clinician is expanding. So the value is expanding because the footprint is expanding.
Yeah, I want to double down on that and back Alex up since he backed me up, but also because he's right. Is the holy mission of B2B software is to win the category and then expand your offerings so you can extract more value or extract more revenue, but provide more value to your customers. It is inherently way easier to provide more value to existing customers than it is to go get the next incremental customer out there. And so this leads to what Bobby was talking about, and I think anyone who's like kind of looking at the industry has seen, is the convergence that by looking to do that, you're saying, wait a minute, the note is trivial. It is trivial to write the note back. Well, I have to do the discrete note. Okay, well, let me do the problem, encode the problems. Let me place the orders. Let me do the HCC coding. Let me do clinical guidelines and clinical decision support. And you start to see the convergence of those co-pilots that we're alluding to, which is you're trying to do all the jobs to be done so that you own that customer as the co-pilot, not just as an ambient scribe, but as an ambient co-pilot, or even take ambient and add in health information exchange data, visual data, like multi-input co-pilot is the end state for Nabla or whatever, barring strategic decisions otherwise and positioning. And so if in that world, you're providing more and more value, you can charge a heck of a lot more for that offering than you could with just note creation.
Brendan, Alex, I actually have a follow-up question for both you guys. It's been talked about a bunch, but I'm curious if you have an updated perspective on the threat from the EHRs themselves, right? Because we're talking a lot here about how these external platforms expand into additional use cases. Well, I'm sure most EHRs are not sitting idly by and thinking about, okay, yeah, we'll just kind of seed more of this to folks. So I'm curious your latest perspective on where you see the threat there. Epic being obviously the biggest one, but certainly from other folks as well.
I think it is 100% a threat that they want to commoditize their complements, and co-pilots are complements, and they offer the path and they let you in and they give you toolbox and if they're Epic, or they give you the path if they're an EHR, and then suddenly they rug pull because they realize how to do it themselves and they want to offer it, and as a B2B software, provide more value to their customers. So inherently, they have a competitive angle, all EHRs, not any particular one. But the unmitigated, unrivaled, unparalleled superpower of us in healthcare as innovators is information blocking, and the rights of information blocking and the ways to leverage that against EHRs when they are not providing equivalent APIs, not allowing access, is an incredibly strong lever that scribes should use. Some scribes do use successfully, and the right to compete is present through information blocking in a way that is fundamentally unique. It is the most pro-competitive law of this kind in any B2B software vertical. And so, at the bare minimum, yes, of course, like there's the innate. It would be silly to imagine that the EHR or any core system of record doesn't want to own every single function of their customer organizations, because then they are extracting maximum revenue and providing maximum value. And so you should assume they want to compete with you, but know that you have the levers to pull to get what you want, to compete on equal footing, or they are guilty of federal infractions and at the state level, criminal charges, because information blocking is a criminal law in the state of Tennessee and other states. And so that's a big superpower.
Alex, I'll address this question back to you and ask you if you're feeling threatened by any EHRs out there.
No, our relationship with EHRs is, of course, very interesting. I won't draw a comparison, but I really enjoy what Netflix CEO said in 2013. He said, the goal is to become HBO faster than HBO can become us. And it's it's interesting. And we are very optimistic because of what Brendan just said, that the legal framework seems to recently provide reassurance that we will have access to this data through EHRs. I also think that in what we see on the market is EHRs, they listen to their customers. They're not crazy, they if your product is good enough, so that the customer, so the health systems, for instance, really wants to use your product. They have adopted it every day. There are thousands of clinicians, and I don't think their EHR will cut us because it will really piss off this customer. And they are not crazy. They do listen to their customers. So I think we had to have a critical mass of customers and a critical footprint of what the product does for them. I think it's also one more guarantee that we will be able to work with EHRs, even if sometimes some of them will be tempted, as Brendan said, to try to build their own solution or do something like that. We are still optimistic on the future in this regard, but it's clearly something to watch.
Let me disagree again, to be a bad guy here, because everybody seems to agree. From my conversation with providers and clinicians, there's still challenges. I agree with Brandon that the information blocking and this other laws, they create a framework where, at least like legally, I guess, providers and vendors can fight the HR system, but like practically on a daily basis, there's still challenges. Just the fact that there is an army of companies that are intermediaries between providers and HR companies tells me that nothing is perfect there. So to even establish those APIs, and you, Brandon, know more about this, but I'm just telling you, just as a messenger from the provider community, there's still challenges there. And so it's not easy, but I'm also hopeful.
I think that there's no challenges. The inherent tension of capitalism is the challenges here, is that like we are drawn into competition, and by virtue of wanting to compete, drawn sometimes into anti-competitive behaviors or behaviors that are not fair, inherently unfair. But we're given the right to fair behaviors in a way that any other B2B vertical is not. And to wield that is something that applications can do to get the things that they are entitled to enable them to provide solutions to providers. In terms of like integrating with EHRs, every core system of record has iPaaS systems across integration as a platform, integration platforms as a service. So like Dell Boomi or things like that. Like integrating B2B systems is hard. And I think that's just a function of different systems trying to talk the same language. We have standards, which many verticals don't. We have a long and storied history of trying to make things connect. But we're also burdened by some of the most complex data of any vertical, right? And so, yeah, there's always gonna be more work to do. And so, like, I don't think it's a solvable problem. And if there is a vertical or something to aspire to point to, say like, oh yeah, like property management systems, they haven't figured it out, or car dealer management systems. They haven't figured out. I would love to hear about what vertical that is, but I don't think it exists. I think we fall into this trap that we believe that healthcare is uniquely disadvantaged when actually it's uniquely advantaged with some of the laws that we have.
I'd like to kind of shift the focus a little bit and talk about value-based care. So my question is, do you think AI scribe tools, sorry, Alex, ambient listening tools lead the way to value-based care solutions, or on the contrary, actually help fee-for-service solutions succeed? Sergey, let's start with you.
Yeah, I wanted to start because when I told some of my friends and colleagues that we're going to have this brilliant podcast, they have some questions specifically on value-based. And I think a lot of clinicians, at least the ones I talk to, are skeptical. When you listen to companies like Abridge, for instance, they mention the word billion 8 times in their fundraising campaign, and the CEO, Shiv Rao, mentioned billion 17 times in the 38 minutes during the recent interview for the No Priors podcast. So clinicians are concerned that AI Scribe or ambient Scribe business is turning into revenue cycle management business. A lot of them are kind of considering that as a negative. The original idea of AI scribes, I think, was to reduce the spend in healthcare, and I guess provide less waste. But in reality, one doctor told me that sometimes it feels like adding garbage to garbage, because some of these AI scribe tools are maximized to create medical codes, not necessarily to reduce waste. So in a sort of grand scheme of things, especially if we think about value-based versus fee-for-service, looks like most of these tools are based for fee-for-service, meaning that sort of maximizing the medical coding, whereas a lot of people in the industry, they're still kind of concerned about things like population health, precision medicine, for example, digital twins, and they don't think, and I don't think, that AI scribe solutions are covering those important topics.
It's a very interesting comment. I'd say it's true that there is a lot of focus on RCM from the ambient AI companies today. I think there is a lot of pressure from investors, with very high valuation. I won't say the name, to have very strong ROI, and until now, the health systems have adopted ambient AI with very soft ROI. It makes your physicians very happy, reduce burnout, and we do have lots of measurements of this impact on clinicians, on their well-being. But the CFO may say, "Hey, I didn't get anything. They are not seeing more patients." And so, if you want to make the CFO happy, you need hardcore ROI at some point, and it will, in the short term, come from RCM. And RCM is so broken there for everyone. There's clearly a lot of leverage, a lot of opportunities, and I think that's the reason why many of the ambient AI companies put a lot of focus on billing, coding, RCM in the short term, because it will make CFOs happy and fix some issues that are very important for providers, hospitals, because if they don't bill enough, they may not survive. But that being said, and I do think that we should be involved in that too, because it's part of the workflows, including for clinicians. Even if you have coders working on claims down the line, asynchronously in another team, they may, in 10-15% of cases, query the clinician 1 week later because something is wrong in the documentation, and they cannot bill. And this is the kind of problem at Nabla we think we should be involved with, to at least save clinicians from this problem. That being said, for value-based care, I think there is a lot of value, but it may be a little bit more long-term. What we've seen with a few customers is that they are using ambient AI to gather much more structured data from every patient encounter or every communication with patients, even on the phone or with chat messages. There are lots of small signals that are ignored today, that are not documented, that may be very interesting in the future to build more personalized models. You mentioned precision medicine. There are not a lot of data sets that enable you to build a precision medicine model today, for instance. And I think one of the value of ambient AI is to be able to gather a lot of structural information from every encounter, so that later we can build these models. Another example on the impact is patient instructions. So this is one of the things we do. It's a kind of after visit summary where we generate like typically one-page letter for the patient after the encounter, with detailed explanation about what happened, the treatment, what to do as follow-up, and we start to have a very good measurement of the very positive impact on these things on the patient outcome, which would be super valuable in a value-based care context. So I think the ROI may be a little bit longer, long-term for value-based care, but definitely we see already many opportunities.
Actually, on this podcast, we're going to have, I guess, our next episode on value-based care, which is a little bit, I think the main topic there is that I think, especially in academia, they even question the whole premise of value-based care. And so we thought it'd be interesting to kind of sit down people who actually do research versus people who are in the trenches and, concerned about this topic. So I think it's coming next, right, Alex?
Yeah, Sergei just wants to remind to subscribe to our channel. Bobby, what's your take?
I was just gonna. I mean, the only thing I was going to add to what Alex just said is, I think there's legitimate concerns about upcoding and inappropriate risk coding in value-based care, right? And so, in theory, AI scribes improve the quality of documentation, right? Well, you're going to likely capture more. You're likely going to be able to code more potentially, or code more accurately, and so that could very well raise costs, right? Now, I think many would argue it's more accurate, but I think just at the end of the day, that still does potentially lead to increased costs for the system. So I think there's a natural tension there that does need to be managed. But I think the flip side of it is also true. Higher quality documentation has lots of good implications for care delivery, right? And that's true in both a value-based care setting and a fee-for-service setting. So I think it's just the core of it is documentation is improving, and that has lots of positive implications, as well as potentially some negative implications in terms of overall cost for the system, both on the fee-for-service side and the value-based care side.
If I could jump in here just briefly, one thing I'll note is that co-pilots as like a subset and a subclass of AI, the benefits of those accrue to the user most dramatically. And so there's a lossiness to the organization. If you're trying to measure, tracing this back to weren't we supposed to get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse, or higher ROI? There are undoubtedly positive statistics for ambient scribes and ambient tools, and they're only going to get better as compute gets better, as they get deeper in and do more of the jobs to be done. But even now, it's really obvious that even at the organizational level, it accrues upwards, but it's lossy. When Dr. Bobby gets back his pajama time, he's not like, oh yeah, let me just funnel that back into 5 more patients. He's like, I'm done. And so there's a lossiness when it's at the user level, these co-pilots, these sidecars. On the other hand, agents, AI agents, the other cohort of the mass onslaught of AI, that accrues directly to the organization. And so while there are far more social blockers, legislative blockers, just fear, uncertainty, and doubt around agents in different capacities, for good reason. Make no mistake, there's undoubtedly more upside directly to the organization that will force organizations that are innovative and or greedy to say, wait a minute, I don't need that lossiness. I can invest that money into agents to do certain things, and it accrues to me directly. And so I think that there's a interesting tension there, that many of the benefits of co-pilots are felt by the end user, by the provider. It's one of those first tools that's been true in a long time, where providers are like, how nice, how awesome, I get some time back. But the clear challenge for Alex and so many other ambient tools, Copilot tools, is to race to get to organizational ROI and prove that lossiness is okay. That they shouldn't just switch wholesale to pursue agents for a number of these jobs to be done.
Yeah, I think the reason why adoption was so fast, everybody says that they've never seen a technology being adopted so quickly across the industry is because, as you said, Brendan, it really brings value directly to the provider, to the user. This is the reason why it was adopted very fast. Now the question, I agree with you that there are many things we should do for the organization directly, move to maybe more agentic kind of tools, but I think starting with the clinician copilot, with the EHR integration, with the trust of the clinicians, is a good position to now expand into these new things.
Where do I invest? Where do I get a little? That's I'm picking up what you're putting down.
And Brendan, would you say, just one follow up on that, do you think it's inherently lossy, or do you think it's a difficulty in measuring the ROI?
There's both. I think it's both, right? Like because you're filtering through these end user behaviors and measuring the second order effects, it's hard to measure, but it is lossy. Like the pajamas time one is like a clear narrative of time accrued back does not accrue directly to the organization. It accrues to the user, who can then make decisions about going and playing with their kids, and they'll do that.
Yeah, for the systems that aren't trying to tighten the screws and make their physicians see X more patients per day.
Yeah. No, but I can tell you, we are working with more than 100 organizations. Nobody ever told me they are seeing more patients. So I've just heard the result of we are working with Denver Health. So to just give you an idea of what they are tracking, they say there are 40% reduction in not typing per patient encounter. So it's for the provider, it's value for the provider. 13% reduction in pajama time. 82% of physicians feel less time pressure per visit, and then patient satisfaction score 15 points higher. So, but you see, none of these is we are seeing more patients, or so this is totally what we see on the field. Yeah.
Let's talk for a sec about liability risks. Sergey, you just recently posted an article called "Doctors Go to Jail, Engineers Don't." So the question is, who should be actual legal responsible for errors in AI generated medical documentation? Sergey, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna pose it as a question. I'm not gonna claim any kind of expertise on this topic. I had an article, basically I observed that in every state there is basically a default law that if you're employing AI, it's usually the provider who is the final voice in the decision making. Sometimes, there are cases where they could argue otherwise. There was a kind of famous case down in Texas where I think a clinic won a case against Pieces Technology. Judge was actually ruled in favor of the health organization. But in general, I think that's a big concern, and that's a big obstacle, in my opinion, probably one of the biggest why clinicians in general are very cautious against using any AI tools. The paradox to me from just conversations with the community is that a lot of these AI models, they are great to finding out solutions or suggestions outside of the so-called standard of care, but then the problem is the physicians tend to stay within the standard of care because that's how they're minimizing their liability risk. And so the sort of the advantage of AI models are not as great for the standard of care, because doctors think they kind of already know and already have a template, maybe how to what's the path forward, with whether it's out of patient or what's the right diagnosis, etc. So anyway, I think liability risk is one of the biggest ones that we have to deal with right now.
In the current framework, an ambient AI is a kind of writing assistant. You could even say it's like autocomplete on steroids. Eventually, the clinician submits the documentation and they are responsible for it. We are more like a writing help. And by the way, if a human scribe makes a mistake, I think, unless I'm wrong, the clinician is also responsible for submitting. Is the only one responsible for submitting documentation if they use the human scribe to write it. So I don't think it's different from that, but clearly, I think there is a little bit of autonomous driving curse, where there are much less accidents with an autonomous car, but we will talk a lot about this. It's very scrutinized. And so I think maybe we should learn from what's happening with autonomous driving. And there is a lot of, it's very important to get clinicians the right training and the right user experience so that they really understand that they need to check, to validate what AI is doing, because AI is not claiming it can do things autonomously. Otherwise, we would submit to the EHR without even showing it. But it needs to be very clear and well structured in the user experience, and so that clinicians actually continue to do it, which is not easy to do.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example of when it comes to new technology, we have three choices. One is stick our hands into the sand and say, and act as Luddites and try and regulate it and ban it. We have the other of just being like, let's go full bore and just see what's out there and let it rip. And obviously those are the wrong choices. It's to do what we're doing with like drones in Austin or Waymos in San Francisco, is to, a jurisdiction wants to try it out in a limited capacity with some structure around it to see if it works or it doesn't. Oh, it works. Let's expand it. Oh, we found some edge cases. Let's regulate in a smart way. And so like there's a very logical path to regulation. I don't think scribes need it for the points that Alex is saying. There's the man in the middle, there's the approval, there's the human interaction that should be justification that scribes and co-pilots can move forward much more quickly. But agents and all more autonomous things, certainly let's find ways to pilot to do certain tasks in controlled settings that we measure and define those contours of what works or doesn't, and then build a regulatory framework around it, expanding from there. But like as you see drones take off in Austin, all of a sudden I'm like, well, I want that delivering my coffee and things like that. Like it's the only logical path for technology adoption in my mind.
I agree that technology is going to get better, and perhaps in a few years we're just not going to do much, I guess, on clinical side, just spend more time with the patients. I'm just saying right now, as of today, there's obviously an opinion or a kind of observation that if you are a small clinic owner, down in Oklahoma, and you're thinking, do I need to spend another how many $1,000 from my budget for an AI scribe, and then I have to kind of check its errors anyway. This is like, I'm just saying, like, how some clinicians are thinking, what the thought process is it even worth it? So that's kind of the question.
Well, as a follow-up to that, well, all of us, we know that none of the AI Scribe tools are FDA approved. Do you think this is okay, or there should be some sort of accreditation? Bobby, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, I think it's fine. I think for the reasons we just talked about, humans being in the loop, it largely being an administrative function where it's, just documenting the visit, like I think kind of with those bounds, I think it's fine. I mean, the FDA does have, I'll say, to varying degrees of clarity, guidelines around what software actually qualifies as a medical device. So I think as you start to bleed into some adjacent areas and get into true clinical decision support, that trade-off starts to change. And yes, there, it should be going through regulated pathways, but as it relates to kind of the pure scribing, in my view is I think it's fine for it not to be run through those pathways.
Yeah, I agree with Bobby. We currently, I mean, given the direction we are taking with the products, doing all these workflows, including some of clinical decision support, we will need to be FDA approved at some point in the future anyway. Because to expand, we will eventually cross the line. The later the better, because once you cross it, the product development velocity is impacted. But we know we'll have to be there in 12, 18, 24 months. I don't know, but this is clearly the future. So there is no, I think it will be useless for us to argue today that we will never be FDA certified. It's not necessary, because I think we will want to be FDA certified later.
Another angle is just that FDA certification is slow. And so, like, do we want to be slow here? Okay, we can make that trade-off societally. And if we want to make that trade-off for scribes or for copilots or for agents, like, we should say, why are we making that trade-off in classic product management style, at just a governmental level? And the only reason to do that is the fear of certain abuses or failure modes. And so, like, what is the failure mode for copilots? Is it the note is misdocumented? Okay, but there should be that review. Is it that they're placing the wrong order of diagnosis? I struggle to see the outright failure mode that is warranting such slowness that we fall way behind other places. It doesn't feel like the risk area where I would put time and attention of an increasingly limited FDA, especially in this admin where the FDA is being, and other government agencies are shrinking. And so to me, it would be silly and backward and divergent from the other prerogatives of this administration, although they've showed reckless abandon in terms of divergent prerogatives.
So in the UK, they actually require a so-called self-certification pathway. And I know at least 2 AI Scribe companies who have done that. In the US, obviously, we have the 21st Century Cures Act, where, AI Scribes, for example, they don't need to be officially approved if they don't rely on diagnostic or treatment decisions, which they don't. So, but my question is, clinicians that they don't give a shit about like all these laws. I think for them it's a signal. If you're a vendor and you're coming to me, you better show me some verification or accreditation. So obviously everybody knows FDA. So if you can show that stamp from FDA, I think that's for them that what kind of matters oftentimes, especially if you're paying out of your budget. And so the question that I have is, why wouldn't Nabla or Abridge or anyone kind of work with the FDA and be the first to be approved? I mean, it would make like all the news, and you'll have so much marketing. I just, even from that perspective, I would think that would make sense.
But yeah, but as I think our concern is not to get the initial certification. The concern is once you have it, you cannot touch your product anymore without going through, like we update our software twice a week or more, and so you can forget about that. So there is a trade-off between agility to make the software evolve very quickly and getting the FDA seal of approval. Currently, we think it's better to be able to move very fast, and we also see that our customers are more. They think like feedback from the other providers, studies like pilots gives them more reassurance on the product than something like a certification. But it will change probably. But at this point, we think the trade-off of not being able to update the product a lot very quickly is not the best decision.
Opportunity cost is real here. Like this is not getting HIPAA certification, high trust certification. Like this is not your SOC 2. This is this is everything on steroids. And Alex isn't gonna, like he's saying, isn't gonna win a single sale shipping, biannual releases. Like this doesn't make sense.
So yeah, Sergey, I don't think you're going to be hired by Nabla as a marketing person. I think we all agree that out of 126 or how many out there scribe tools, there are a lot of AI tourists, but VCs seem to still throw money at a lot of them, even such as Suki. You probably know that company. So do you think is it just a trend and VCs are just following the trend? Yeah, we need to invest in another AI Scribe tool or ambient listening solution or anything like that? Or is there actually a chance they can get their money back, knowing that there are still no profitable solutions out there?
So I'm going to throw in my opinion, which Alex knows, is that first of all, I mean, Suke, in my opinion, and I've looked into their white papers and went to conferences. Companies like that, I think, is not are not what this industry is all about. I feel like in many cases, once you're in certain circle of VCs and healthcare execs, you can get to certain venture capital. Not always, but in many cases. And so I don't think a lot of these solutions they're real. But they're doing their function. They're very shiny. They're getting customers, and that's why they still exist. But most importantly, they have the capital. But I think a lot of it is who you know in this industry, and so I don't think that's a good development. But again, there's some positive stories as well. So I have to acknowledge that.
I will not take the alley-oop to dunk on Suki. Actually, they're pretty legit. I will take the alley-oop to dunk on VCs and say, yeah, of course they invest in bullshit too. But like that is their job. Their job is to be wrong like 90% of the time, and then fund like crazy ideas, the 10% that are transformational. And so like they're not private equity. Not that private equity is in good shape. They are to fund and be wrong quite often. Not success as a measure of VC like backing and like returns is a weird barometer for success, because in this fragmented industry, and I alluded to this earlier, there's room for smaller non-venture capital funded or more focused technology, and there will be a number of solutions that are built by people who know the home health industry or the skilled nursing facility industry and hyper optimize this tool and never take a dime. And so like I think there's different bars for success of what a product is, and that can be profitable, that can serve a need and serve a constituency, some fragment of the fractal B2B market. I think in general, it's hard to make B2B software that are point solutions. And that's why it is that holy mission of Copilots to expand, to take as much surface area as possible, to provide as much value and return as much revenue, because it is a B2B market. The core system of record will grow, and in this case, the EHR will grow to encompass as many functions as possible. And so you need to own that land grab now to get to a point where you can take a piece of that market. I think the other angle that's underappreciated that Alex was alluding to with like his hints at future roadmap are, if you start taking not just the software budget via the Copilot functions, but if you start taking it via the agent route, the headcount budget, the actual staffing, and can help reduce staffing, and take that spend that was previously untapped, then you're starting to move into a part of the market a TAM, a total spend from a healthcare organization that is wildly more than you might be available if you're just doing pure play software. And so I think offering that leverage, offering that growth potential, taking from that part of the spend is really important because healthcare technology is not a $4 trillion industry. Healthcare technology is like, I don't know, like $100 billion industry or something like that, like something monumentally smaller than people expect. And so it's really important to think about in this next era of software, AI-driven software, are we starting to tap into the 4 billion and that can allow us to reduce headcount and be more efficient? And that comes from taking the 90% of spend that isn't software, well over 90% of spend that isn't software today.
Let me quickly disagree on the venture capital side. Data shows otherwise, especially in digital health, and I've done a lot of research on that. Venture capitalists, and to some extent private equity, but not as much, have failed to pick winners in this industry. They're serving their limited partners, I understand that, but they haven't even served them. In healthcare, I think it's a dangerous precedent because you're serving one group of players in the industry at the expense of another often group, which is clinicians and patients. And I think that kind of asset allocation model has not worked for healthcare, and we need to think how to make it more optimal and better. Venture capital and private equity have not worked for healthcare, in my opinion. When you're in a business of taking a startup and basically doing pump and dump, taking it at a certain price and then pushing it to somebody else at a higher price, that's not a business for healthcare to me. I'm gonna take a stab at Glenn Tallman. I don't think that was a great deal for the industry. Awesome deal for him when he pushed Livongo for 18 billion, and now the value of the company more like less than $500 million. So while he made money for himself and LPs, the rest of the industry suffered. So that's kind of my example.
I think it is very challenging. The comparisons we make, venture capital, most of the successes are consumer-facing technology or horizontal B2B software or hard tech. And vertical specific technology, it's interesting to study that and look at that and say where have there been successes? And are those successes just core systems of record, or are they point solutions? And yeah, I don't totally disagree with it. I'm trying to find I try to be an agreeable person and struggle with the disagreement. So I do think that distilling out the hype and all the fundraising and saying who actually truly had lasting impact, who actually went to public markets and is a durable business that's not an actual provider organization, an insurer, plays to what I was sort of saying before. And this is where I think we find common ground, that this next era of software might offer that, because the agents offer this convergence of taking the manual steps of healthcare, which is where most of the spend is, and making it software computable, making it a compute function, and reducing cost of care or drastically expanding capacity as a result. I think that's the optimism of what you're saying is, well, shit, this last era is so much of it is a failure if you actually look at the public markets and the outcomes. Well, maybe we're on the edge of something much better by virtue of tackling that 90% that is human waste, that is operational waste.
Let's end our episode with some positive note, and actually question to all of you guys. You see that how AI ambient listening was adopted really fast. AI agents that we talked a lot about today, when do you think we can see holistic, sophisticated AI agents in healthcare? Who wants to go first?
Alex, when you shipping them?
So I really think that full AI agents, so as opposed to copilots or assistants, will play many roles in healthcare. I don't think we are going to replace clinicians at all, because I think the human component, empathy, decision, is not something we want to replace, and that maybe we cannot replace it anyway. but many other roles, I think, administrative roles, will be impacted by agents, especially in the midterm, where so many processes, so many workflows are so inefficient. Like you have to call a call center to get prior authorization, for instance. It's ridiculous. It should be an API, but it's not. There is no API. So until there is an API, of course, I want my agent, my AI agent, to call your call center if you really want to have a call center and not an API. And then one day you will eventually have an API and we can remove my agent and just have an API call. Better for everyone. So I think the transition to a better healthcare system with less waste will be accelerated a lot by autonomous agents. But I'm not talking about care delivery. I'm really talking about the clerical stuff. But I think it was good to start. I think it's really positive that AI started to be adopted in healthcare as copilot, as assistant, so that everybody gets used to collaborate with AI, understand why it's powerful, but also understand the limits and get familiar with this technology. And then I think it will actually prepare the way for the deployment of more autonomous agents in other workflows. So this is my view, but it's clearly the next frontier for us are these kind of agents.
So there is no release date yet on your calendar?
Not yet.
Bobby,
I do
what do you
think I think the question around the role of agents in care delivery is a pretty interesting one. I mean, I think the line that Alex just said is the one that you hear most common, and I think is likely true in many ways. But I am curious just about the convenience factor on the consumer side and how quickly that actually might accelerate the actual role of agents in true care delivery. Like if my options are I can wait to speak to my primary care physician for, a few days a week, a couple weeks versus go on whatever like the validated version of high quality, O3 is or whatever to get a high quality answer right now, like I'm probably going to do that. And I think as people are already doing that to varying degrees today with systems that haven't truly been tested for those use cases, and I think that's just going to continue to increase. So maybe that is my like slightly controversial take, is that there's I think people underplay the role that agents will play on care delivery side for understandable reasons, because that is, I think, contentious and scary for a lot of folks. But I think it'll be actually driven more by consumer demand than the other way around.
I'm personally excited about AI agents in rural areas. I think that actually is needed right now in this country. There are many areas where people cannot get even to medical advice right away. And so having a well-trained AI agent to talk to right now, not like next year, not in 2 years, I think that's really important, to be able to talk to somebody versus to talk to nobody. I think that's where we can have a sort of low-hanging fruit solution.
I agree with all that. Like I tend to be a bull on this stuff, and I think that I already see health systems starting to play with and adopt clinical agents in certain settings. And like, look, if they can offer you a dermatology appointment, to Bobby's point, tomorrow instead of 6 months out, that's an AI agent that you take the photo and they can prescribe you like some cream to take care of it. I'm going to take that. And if I can say, hey, you could have behavioral health that's $1 a visit versus $500 a visit or something, there's a monetary factor that could factor in when you have infinite capacity because of infinite compute. And so again, the value of agents accrues to the organization. So greedy organizations will follow that to have competitive edge, to have higher efficiency. And I think those forces will cause this to happen on the clinical side much faster than we're comfortable with if we don't figure out the ways we want to do it, which is sort of playing back to like piloting, figuring it out, creating some playground somewhere to to try this out, or some people are just going to do it and break laws in doing so, in terms of prescribing, in terms of licensure. And that's just the unfortunate reality of people not reading the law, because the government websites are all down.
All right, gentlemen, let's all read the law. I hope that we're gonna gather again very soon and talk more about copilots and AI agents in healthcare. This is very, very exciting. So thank you so much for this amazing episode. And yeah, we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.